So we lived in Toulouse, and that's where we started getting a few problems. Not with the Germans, they weren't there, but with the collaborators, the French Gestapo, and some of them were just as bad. We left in the evening, at darkness, on December 17th. From Luchon itself to approximately the foot of the mountains that we'd have to climb, at every few blocks or kilometers, there was a French gendarme as a lookout for us. There were, of course, a lot of collaborators, but there were a lot of good Frenchmen too, and we owe our lives to them. When we got to and we were 15. There was in the group, there was my parents, my sister, my brother, myself. There was my aunt, an aunt from Belgium who had managed to escape to us. Her son and husband tried to get into Switzerland. They stopped in Grenoble and phoned us. They needed money to pay the people to get into. My father did not send money. He sent a man with the money to get them. They were all caught. The man was shot. I don't know what happened to my uncle. We never heard from him again. My cousin, who is now living in Brussels, ended up in Buchenwald. Came out weighing about 70 pounds or something.
When you were crossing the mountains,
that was a terrible experience.
You were just literally carrying your possessions with you?
Yes, and in one of the possessions was a bag that was handmade specially to hide our complete fortune of jewels, which were sewn in the bag. The bag was handmade, and we put in that bag food, so it would look like if you're carrying food, but actually this had our complete and it was heavy. So one of the guides, we have two guides, one in front, one in back. One of the guys says, "Here, let me take the bag." If we would have said no, he could get suspicious. So my mother says, "Here, okay," and he was holding my hand anyways. So he unfortunately hit a crevice and came tumbling down the crevice with the bag. He almost took me with him. Somebody grabbed me. The crevice was hidden by snow. And of course, he never came back. And the bag is probably still lying somewhere at the bottom of a mountain in the Pyrenees. My mother refused to go on. She said, "We got nothing left, just a few dollars or whatever we had, which was sewn in our garments and some that were in the pockets."
Was it in, what was it? Was it money?
US dollars.
Yeah.
We got into Spain. Terrible process. It took us a day and a night. We knew that people were doing, that it was happening. We knew that people who were going into Spain were being turned back. We knew that people going into Spain were being shot for their money. We knew that some of the smugglers that we were paying $10,000 a head for were also taking everything else and not taking you to the right places. And there was a lot of snow, so it was very difficult. We were going to Barcelona, where we had a contact. As I said, we had contacts. The contact in Barcelona was from the JDC, the Jewish Distribution Committee, from the United States.
This had been arranged in...
It's not arranged. We knew where there were contacts because people were going.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the world didn't listen. The world didn't believe. And still today, a lot of them don't believe. But we knew because we had ways.
And how did your family support themselves? Was it through the Joint Distribution Committee? Or?
Joint distribution helped, but we also had money left over. We didn't have any jewels left. or very few. My father had a rink that he still had. There was still a few things, but mostly by selling and selling American dollars, which we still had. By the time we came to Canada, my father had $50 left. That's what we came with. That was after paying everything. In any case, while we were in Spain, and the United States finally, after much prodding, allowed children of survivors, only children, one per family, to come for the duration of the war to America, especially if you had family. So we had my father applied, and we were given one space. We had a family meeting, and my sister wanted to go. So she was the oldest.
How old was she?
At the time, this was 1940, 43, she was 15, approximately, actually. So she went on one of these transport, they were called, to the United States, ended up in Detroit. My father had a sister living in Detroit, and we figured that once she's there, she could possibly make papers for us, because my father didn't see any future in Europe anymore. He was very bitter. He had lost a fortune. He had lost a sister. My mother also had lost family. And he said, and also he was bitter because after living in France for so many years, he wasn't considered a Frenchman, he was considered a Jew. And that upset him terribly. As a matter of fact, he refused to even apply for reparations from the Germans. And my sister went, but papers weren't forthcoming. Eventually, we were told that we could come, that Canada was opening its doors for a grand total of approximately 250 people. Out of a few million, it wasn't so bad. So we got papers, and we arranged to leave from Portugal on a Portuguese boat, which was neutral, because don't forget we were still in the middle of the war. This was 1944. As a matter of fact, we left Lisbon on the 20th of March, 1944.
How did you apply? Where did you apply to for the visas to get to Canada?
Barcelona.
And do you know why, out of so many applicants, yours was accepted? I would imagine that.
I don't know if there were that many applicants. A lot of people who still had families in Europe wanted to stay in Europe. What happened was we were stopped outside of Philadelphia, and we were flying the Portuguese flag. It was a very hard journey. We left Lisbon the 20th of March and got to Philadelphia in April.
What kind of boat was it?
It was called the Serpa Pinto, approximately 10,000 tons. I think it had been a troop carrier, maybe, a small ship. I never went into a cabin. I slept on top of the deck because it was the worst storms that you could even, we instead of going forward, we were going sideways. And it took us a full 2 weeks to cross the Atlantic. We met in Barcelona, and we came on the ship. By the way, we landed in Canada, in Montreal, on April the 8th, 1944, which makes it exactly 50 years. And there was a train, 2 trains. There were 2 trains. One was going to Toronto, and the other one was going to Montreal. We were divided, and we were given a choice. Some people didn't know what they were doing, so they went to Toronto. The ones who knew what they were doing came to Montreal. Actually, we took Montreal because we were French.
So you were allowed 3 days to spend in the United States.
According to the papers.
Right.
But were never respected.
They just whisked you onto a train.
They put us on the train, they locked all the doors and all the windows. And they guarded it. The train took off, we came to Montreal. Actually, when we crossed the border at, it wasn't called La Col then, I have it in my papers, was called a different name, Grand something. They opened the train, they opened the windows, we got some fresh air, and we were welcomed into Canada.
How long was the train ride?
I don't really recall. The only thing is I remember going into Windsor Station. I remember that there was a huge banner welcoming us to Canada. There were representatives of the, I think the Jewish Immigration Aid Society. I know that there were people from the Congress. I know there was somebody named Rose who was there. I think he came to Philadelphia, as a matter of fact, from the Congress.
What did you do once you came to Montreal?
Well,
How did you get settled?
my father and my mother both went to work. They weren't being taken advantage of because it was during the war and where people were making some pretty fair salaries, but my father made $20 a week and my mother made $30 a week. We rented, not an apartment, but, well, it must have been a triplex because there were 3 floors with stairs outside. And this is where we learned a complete new way of life. Because, I won't call it a ghetto, but Jews in Canada congregate. Maybe in the United States too. We did not have a Jewish area. In Paris there is, but not really. Not really. There's the Place de la République, Platzel, you know, this type of thing. But Jews live all over the place with their neighbors or Gentiles. Here, when we came, we were told you have to live in this and this area. So we lived on St. Urban Street. I was one of the horsemen. As a matter of fact, I was quite friendly with Mordechai Richler. Went to school with him. And as a matter of fact, he did talk about a little Frenchman in his book, The Horseman of St. Urban, and I'm proud to say it was myself. We lived on St. Urban. My father worked in a factory. My mother worked in a factory. They didn't work too long in those factories because my father, after a while, decided to, well, he became the manager of a place. And he was there for a while, then he went into business for himself.